friends, and welcome to episode 117 of Did You Bring the Hummus podcast. I'm Kimberly, your host, and I'm super excited to be here with you today. Did You Bring the Hummus is a podcast for all things vegan. Episodes post every Monday on your favorite podcast app. Before we get started, I have one very important question for you. Did you bring the hummus? Check out my website to learn more about how to support the podcast, sign up for a meditation session, and everything else I'm up to. By the way, though, I have joined forces with Jennifer Shlomovich of The Confident Vegan to bring you the next great thing in morning TV, That Vegan Morning Show, which airs on YouTube every Monday at 7 a.m. Eastern. Join our mailing list and get a free recipe ebook of some of our favorites. You'll find that link in the show notes. Today, I am joined by Sue Joyce. Sue is the founder of Little Green Pigeon C.I.C, a national UK organization with two core aims: to raise funds to support rehabilitators caring for pigeons and to campaign for a UK-wide ban on pigeon racing. After running a pigeon sanctuary for over 15 years, Sue launched Little Green Pigeon to take her advocacy to a national level. In 2025, she founded the National Pigeon Advocacy Association, NPAA, and together, the two organizations are set to host the world's first Pigeon Advocacy Conference in Staffordshire, England, in September of 2025. Sue speaks at festivals and events across the UK, raising awareness about pigeon welfare and the exploitation of birds in sport and industry. She is also the co-host of the Bloody Vegans podcast, alongside her co-host and editor, Jim Moore. In June 2025, Sue co-founded the Animal Rights Choir with her best friend, Vegan Queen V, an in-person and online community choir created to empower people to find and raise their voices for animals. The choir now performs at festivals and animal rights events across the UK. In addition to her advocacy work, Sue also works part-time for the Vegan Business Mastermind, an online mentorship program supporting vegan entrepreneurs. I am so glad for Sue and this episode. I think pigeons are pretty misunderstood, and this episode gives them the respect they deserve. You'll also hear Sue's vegan journey, all about the other projects she's working on, and of course, hummus. Hey, Sue, welcome. I'm so glad you're here with me today.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this.
Me too. Share with me your vegan journey.
I have been vegetarian since I was 8 years old. I was out being dragged along shopping. I hate shopping, and I was dragged along shopping every weekend as a child because my parents love shopping. And we were in a town centre, and there was a International Fund for Animal Welfare stand, and they were giving out leaflets about animal testing. And it's the first time I'd ever seen anything like that, and I was horrified. And I think I don't know whether this is a memory that I've invented in my adult brain, but I'm fairly certain I remember seeing someone dressed as a rabbit, when they used to dress up and have horrible, makeup running down their faces. And it really affected me. And I remember sitting in the car just in silence. And I was a very chatty child, believe it or not. Nothing changes. And I remember that's probably my youngest memory, which is not a brilliant memory to have as one of your youngest memories, but it really was. And I feel like that's where my life really started. Mm-hmm. And I must have read that leaflet, because obviously miles before internet, because we're going back to, when was I 8, like 1983, 84, way before the internet. So I read that leaflet back to front, and remember saying to my parents, we need to do something about this, and then being like, oh no, don't be silly. And they still kind of have that attitude now, which is a real shame. So I went vegetarian pretty much overnight, said to my mum, I'm going vegetarian. Mum cooked for us all. And mum sort of said, well, okay, that's fine, but you need to learn to cook for yourself. So I did. And I think she made me eat fish, or she used to like put fish in dishes that she would make for about another year and a half maybe. And then that kind of, she was like, okay, you haven't fallen to bits yet. So I was vegetarian for a long time, till I was in my 30s. And I worked in veterinary medicine. I worked in large animal practice, dairy farms, didn't see anything wrong with it. Massive hypocrite, really, because I was out there saying, we've got to do better, and we shouldn't test on animals, and we shouldn't eat animals. And meanwhile, eating cheese, drinking milk, like a lot of us do. Did that for years and years and years, till I was in my mid-30s. and I'd had a child. They came home from school when they were about the same age, a little, maybe about 10. They'd always been vegetarian, of course, and they just came home. And I remember just walking through the, hi, Mom, we're not doing enough. We need to be vegan. I remember just thinking, what? I'm going, don't be silly. We're fine. We're absolutely fine. And I was still working in veterinary practice at the time. I was I was working at the front of the practice. I wasn't an anaesthetist anymore. And I went into work the next day and I was like, I think I'm vegan. And they all just were like, laughed. They were like, don't be ridiculous. And loads of them were vegetarian. Loads of the surgeons were vegetarian. Loads of the nurses were vegetarian. I was like, well, that's what I thought as well. But actually, they've talked to me about dairy and blah, blah, blah. And a few other people sort of said the same. They were like, yeah, I've heard this. And I guess it was pretty much overnight. That night, we just kind of went, right, that's it. You're right. I'd listened to what they were saying. Sorry, that's my dog barging into the room. Hello, dog. Rescue dog. He wants to be part of the podcast. Sorry. And yeah, and I guess that was it. It was literally overnight then, was sort of like my wife at the time, she wasn't even vegetarian. And now I look back in horror and think, how can I have loved somebody and lived with somebody that wasn't even vegetarian, let alone vegan? I'm just going to shut the door. Sorry. So sorry.
No worries. Dogs are welcome.
So, yeah, dogs. Well, he's vegan as well. He's been vegan for all his 13 years, haven't you, Noggy? So yeah, and yeah, that's it. It was just an overnight thing for me. And then that thing that a lot of us do, we just look back and think, why did I not see this earlier? Mm-hmm. And I think that's why, as difficult as it can be once you've been a vegan a long time. So that was 15 years ago, I think. It's easy to be like, everyone should be vegan, and it's also easy to forget that we were in that place once, and you do need to meet people where they're at, really, and educate them with kindness. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And I really feel like, almost without sounding too, I don't know if we were an expression of it, but we were meaning sort of too spiritual and manifesting it. I'm not really that person, but I also do feel that is what changed my life in so many ways, mm-hmm. because I genuinely thought before then I was doing everything. I was working in practice. I'd done a lot with dog behaviour. I'd worked with various other people. I'd had a daycare centre for dogs, all the things that I was doing for all these domestic animals. And because I was vegetarian, I thought, I'm doing this for all animals. And actually I wasn't. And I think it's that slow realisation of, oh my goodness me, I've contributed to this and it's horrendous. Yeah. And things need to change. So yeah, that was the day. I feel absolutely blessed that happened, because my life is so, it's difficult, don't get me wrong, but I do make it difficult for myself with the work that I do. But I'm free of guilt, and I feel that I personally will leave the world in a better place than I found it. So yeah, I do feel that it's a really freeing thing. And I think we need to impart that to other people, that actually veganism, a lot of people think it's restrictive mm-hmm. from a diet point of view and a health point of view, but also that it brings misery and hardship. And actually, I think if it's done properly with a good community of other vegans around you, it brings joy.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. My story started with animal testing as well.
Really?
Yeah, in high school, I became familiar with animal testing and products that I was buying. And I started showing my friends, hey, you see this label says not tested on animals. You should buy this one instead. But I was still eating animals. I didn't go vegetarian then. And then when I was a couple months before my 21st birthday, I went vegetarian. I got an issue of PETA's Animal Times in the mail, and it was addressed to me, but I have no idea why, because I don't remember filling anything out. It was like divine intervention, if you will.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I read that cover to cover that night, up physically sick all night long, thinking about all of the animals who I'd consumed over the course of my whole life. And I was vegetarian overnight, and nobody believed it was going to stick. I didn't eat vegetables. I didn't know how to cook. It was like a whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, like you, I stayed vegetarian for a long time. And I thought, I'm doing enough. I had changed out all of my clothing, any products. It was just the cheese and ice cream that was holding me back. And I finally went vegan in 2015. So I was 35. Yeah.
Really similar then. Yeah. Really similar. That's amazing.
Yeah. And you're right. Yeah. It's so freeing.
It absolutely is. It's incredible how our stories are very similar, and I've had that before. I've got a friend over here who he's an amazing guy. He's 70, or I'll get his age wrong, but he's about 30 years older than me. And he oh no, he's not, he's only 20 something. Yeah, I'm 50. I was thinking he's at least 30 years. No, I'm 50. Brilliant. No, he's only 25 years older than me. Anyway, you forget when you're vegan, you're so young, you forget.
Exactly.
Forget our ages. He has a theory, and he's been vegan an awfully long time, years and years and years. And he has a theory that one of us is placed into each family to allow that family to experience a kind life through a family member. And obviously I don't know your circumstance, but certainly the more vegans I talk to have similar stories to us, that, you know, that they came to it through, as you say, divine intervention with you.
Yeah.
And for me, it was weird because it was a repeat of my childhood, but with my son. But yeah, the more I speak to, the more I find that we are the only one in our families. And you think, oh, that's crazy. Like his theory. Now, obviously, I know that's probably not the reality, but it's kind of a nice little story to tell ourselves. But it is crazy how so many of us just come across it, stumble across veganism. Certainly back then, maybe not so much now because it's more out there, isn't it, in mainstream media? But back then, when it wasn't, that's amazing that you did that. Incredible.
Yeah.
And yeah, with you, it brings you joy as well?
Yeah. I mean, like you had said, the feeling you're free of guilt and all of that stuff that comes up. And now that you're not part of that system anymore, there is a freedom and just a comfort, I think, in it. And then, yeah, the more vegans I bring into my life, the more joyful it is. I find joy just in knowing that I've made this choice and I'm committed to it. And every day I wake up vegan. But yeah, the more vegans in my life, the more fun it is, for sure. And like, my mom went vegan, my husband went vegan. So I've got them like
Amazing.
close by too.
Incredible. Yeah. I mean, my partner's, he was vegan when I met. And yeah, I don't think I could. I have two friends that are not vegan they're in England. I live in Wales, and I don't see them very often. And I've known them for 25 years, a long time, and they've been incredibly supportive. And one of them is vegetarian, has been a long-term vegetarian, but he's almost vegan and slips in and out veganism. And Elora, bless her, she'll never be vegan, I don't think, ever. And she's the only person I know who's not. And other than that, because I feel like I would really struggle to love anybody in any form of way that love is. I really struggle with that when their efforts, it's really hard. And I think so literally I make exceptions for probably my parents and a couple of my cousins that I'm close to, and Laura. And other than that, it's really difficult to have people in your life, isn't it, that aren't, because you sort of go, but why would you want to do this? And why can't you see it? So I think that is the side of you that can really eat away at you. But as you say, the other side, there are just so many people in your life. And you're right, it is joy. And I definitely felt like, I think I was vegan for probably about 5 years, if I had to put a time on it, before I remember just feeling like almost this big, like, like this big breath of release, and just going, that's it. That's what I've been missing. That's what I should have been doing since I was that little girl, like when I was 8 years old. This is what I should have been. Why didn't somebody tell me?
Yeah.
And my life would have been so much smoother. That it's that guilt of everything that's been holding me back. And it's just a big breath of a big release, isn't it, of all that built up years of sort of guilt and tension and everything. And you're like, oh, this is amazing. And then you talk to other people that feel the same, and no wonder we're all happy and all just like, this is great. It's because it is. It genuinely is. It's fantastic.
I always say it's the most beautiful thing I've ever done in my whole life.
Yes. 100% agree.
Yeah. So, Sue, some people might know you as the pigeon lady. Why would someone call you that?
Well, so I've had, I know I mentioned I worked in veterinary practice, and I did that for a long time in my life. And then I broke my back. I had an accident and broke my back. And I continued to work in practice, but as I say, at the front of the practice, I was like a client liaison for surgical teams at a hospital in the Midlands of England. And because I was working at the front of the practice, whereas I'd always worked in theatres at the back of the hospital, I saw people bringing in birds. And it was the first time I'd really noticed they were bringing them in. And it was a big city practice. There were loads of birds and loads of pigeons being brought in. And I just felt that the way that they were treated was basically they were just euthanized because there was nowhere for them to go. So people would bring in a bird that was injured or a fledgling that really they just needed feeding up and releasing. I didn't know that at the time because I knew nothing about birds really. And yeah, basically they would be brought in. The receptionist would say, they were doing their job. They were like, oh, okay, we'll go get somebody. They'd come through. They'd go, okay, we'll take the bird. They'd take the bird through the back, and it would just be euthanized, and not even done properly. And it was just like when we all qualified, and when we do this, we signed an oath. Basically, you give an oath that you will do as little harm. It's a little bit like veganism. It's like, right, we're to do no harm. That's the code of conduct, rightly so. If which is why I really struggle now looking back with anybody that's in the very profession that isn't vegan. I find it, a human doctor wouldn't eat their patients. Right. So why, anyway, but that's a whole other subject.
That's a really good point.
But yeah, it's really odd. So, but so bringing these birds in. So I was luckily at the time that practice was owned by a really kind man, and I'd worked for him for a long time. This particular surgeon, he was a lovely, lovely guy called John, and I just sort of said to him, do you know what? Is there enough space in the kennel room for me to just have one kennel, and I will take these birds home? I will pay for them. I will take responsibility for these birds, but can we take them in? And I'll take them home at night, but have them here today to look after, and I'll learn all about it. And at the time, Percy, he was little at the time, had really got into ornithology, really got into birds, because we did a lot of dog walking and just a lot of general walking. I was really lucky. I've always lived in fairly rural places, so I bought him a pair of binoculars, and we were always out bird watching and loved it. So he was like, well, I'll help, Mum. So okay, brilliant. And this was just before I went vegan. So it kind of all came together. So we were out looking at birds, and then we had birds in our house. He had birds in his bedroom. There were birds in the bathroom. There were birds everywhere. It was chaos. My wife was very, very tolerant of it. They were in the garden. They were everywhere. And we were doing what we could. I started working with a vet that knew a bit about birds, and we started looking after them. And there was a nurse at the practice that was looking after the pigeons. And she took on all the pigeons, and I looked after all the garden birds. And then she left. So I had to start looking after the pigeons. And even then, a little bit like the veganism, I still remember thinking, I do not want to look after pigeons. They are so complicated compared to insectivores, like compared to garden birds. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. They're terrifying. They're a bit dirty. And absolutely all those things, a little bit like the way people see vegans, like, oh, these weird people. I was the same person about people, like, all these birds. And literally that day I had 20 pigeons given to me because she left, and I was like, wow, this is going to be a steep learning curve. And it really was. And I'm sure that to begin with, many of those birds probably suffered in my care because I didn't know what I was doing. They are so different. And that is something that even to a non-vegan, anybody that works in a caregiving or, for animals or people, if someone in your care suffers because of you, that's something you can't let go of, really. And I would say that's the only troubling thing about anybody working in sanctuary, is that there's always going to be times when you don't get it quite right. And I think I made a lot of mistakes at the beginning. I really do. But that just pushes you on to learn more. So then I started looking after more and more birds, and it got to the stage where it was thousands each year, thousands and thousands. So something had to change. So I became very fortunate financially. I was in a position where I could give up my job, and the house I'd moved to had a quarter of an acre of a garden at the back. It had and it was rented, but the landlord was happy for me to have aviaries. So somebody sponsored me, a family member sponsored me about £20,000. We bought a load of aviaries. I was extremely fortunate financially. Not anymore, but back then it was all right. And so we set up a sanctuary, and I did still look after garden birds, but I just kind of locally in Staffordshire and in England got known for looking after pigeons. I still to this day think there are people that did a much better job of looking after pigeons than me. I am not the oracle, and I think because I'm quite vocal about it online, I get a reputation for knowing what I'm doing. And actually I don't think I mean, I do a bit, but there are people that look after them a lot better than I can, and a lot better than I did. But I just did my best. But what basically happened was I ended up with a sanctuary of 400 birds, 400 pigeons, because the RSPB, which is a British charity that looks after birds, hold a number they gave out, which would not be done now. They would be in a lot of trouble for doing that. But because of that, I had hundreds of birds brought in. I managed to get some people working for me. And that's when I set up Little Green Pigeon, because I was like, do you know what? This was just coming out of like, basically, I didn't retire, but it was kind of that kind of pot of money that I'd got. And then it was kind of like, actually, this isn't going to work because all my money was going on these birds. So I set up a community interest company to fund it, which is what Little Green Pigeon actually is. So that was why. And then I met, and people kind of said, oh, the pigeon lady back there. But then I met David, who used to run Vegan Business Tribe, and we've become really good friends. And he kind of coined the phrase Sue the Pigeon Lady about 5 years ago when I met him in lockdown, and it just stuck. So yeah, now I've even just, my Instagram page didn't used to be called, I've got a Little Green Pigeon one, but I've got another one for myself, and it used to be called something different. And in the end, I just thought, do you know what? I might as well change this to Sue the Pigeon Lady, because that's what everybody calls me. So yeah, it's a long story, but yeah, that's what happened.
I love that. How are pigeons different from, because you mentioned the garden birds are insectivores. What do pigeons eat? How are they different from these birds?
So the pigeons that you see, and obviously I can only talk about British pigeons really. There are lots and lots and lots, hundreds of different species of pigeon all across the world. Some of them live in jungles, some of them live in woodlands, some of them live on the coast. There's loads of different types. And the reason that I called it Little Green Pigeon is because one of the types is a little green pigeon. They've got a beautiful pink and orange breast, and they're very, very bright green. And green's like a colour that I love. And so that was kind of I went with that bird. And that's actually the logo for our business, is a little green pigeon that my son drew for me. But in the UK, they're a little bit, to our eyes, they're a little bit more dull, but actually they see in ultraviolet, and pigeons are actually quite a colourful bird if you're under an ultraviolet light. But in this country, we have about, is it 5 we have? So we have, which is the guy that lives out in countryside. We have Eurasian collared doves that are much smaller, and they came over here in the 50s from Europe, and they're very much now native birds because there's plenty of food for them. We have stock doves, which they look like a cross between a feral pigeon, put my teeth in, and a wood pigeon. A lot of people think they are just feral pigeons. We have turtle doves, which are really super rare. They migrate over here each year, and they're really, really rare. And then we have feral pigeons. I think that's all of them. And the difference between them all is, or most of them, apart from feral pigeons, are wild birds. So they can survive in the wild. There is plenty of food for them. They eat insects, they eat seeds, they eat grain, they eat, some of them will eat sort of, clovers and those kind of things, and flowers and grasses, and they'll eat berries. So they are all very much native to the UK, or they are now. The difference with a feral pigeon is they are domestic birds. So humans bred them about 6,000 years ago from a form of, they think, from a jungle fowl and a rock dove. They think that's where they came from. Just, long before we could do genetic engineering, but they just bred them in the way that we've bred domestic cats, domestic dogs. It's exactly the same. So we've bred them for meat and eggs. That's what they were used for. And then also, because we realized they could fly home if you took them away from the home, we used them from communication. So that's where they've come from. So there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And then as we've moved on with technology, and as we've moved on with not what we eat, but what a lot of people eat with chickens, they've just been cast aside, basically, because there are more efficient ways to get meat from the corpses of animals than pigeons. So yeah, that's where they've come from. So basically they were just dumped. And it still happens today. And I believe there aren't so many there's not really any, there aren't any pigeon farms, because it's not a big thing in this country. Some people do still eat baby pigeons, and there'll be wood pigeons that they're eating generally, that they shoot here. But certainly in parts of America and in other countries, there are still farms that do breed pigeons. They tend to be something called king pigeons now. They're very, very big, white birds, not quite as big as a chicken, but much bigger than the pigeons that you would see on your streets in cities. And there was a case about 6 years ago, actually, where, and I don't know where in America, my geography is shocking, but a pigeon farm got flooded. It was coastal, it got flooded, so they just let all the birds go. And they reckon there were about 6,000 birds, and they would have all just starved to death because they're domestic. So they don't know where to get their own food from. And in the UK, there is no natural food for them. So when people see them in the towns, like around their feet and outside, the pasty shops and those kind of things, all they're trying to do is get some food, and they come in towards people because to them, even though a lot of them will have been born on the street now, their history and their genetics they've got that memory that they come from people caring for them, so that they're domestic. And that's the main difference between pigeons that you see on the towns and the wild pigeons. And then the difference between garden birds, depending on where you live, and what you call them, is they're just very, very wild. They'll eat insects. Obviously you've got crows and jackdaws at carrion that will eat sort of decomposing bodies and things like that. So they're very, very different. Where pigeons, they are just not like that. They're grainivores. They only eat grain. Feral pigeons. So it's a big problem because we've bred them, we've released them, and now we're like, on you go, look after yourself, guys. And they can't look after themselves, and yet we vilify them for it.
Yes. Yeah.
It's really difficult.
It's heartbreaking when I learned that history, that we've done this to them. And now they are, and what you said there about how like it's just in their genetics, like we come from people, they will help us. And oh my goodness, I don't know. The longer I'm vegan, the more sensitive I become, I think. And it just really, I'm like almost in tears right now thinking about these pigeons that are out on the street. And like, I remember, I don't spend as much time in New York City now, but when I was in my 20s, I went into the city quite a bit, and I remember seeing people trying to kick pigeons, and thankfully I never saw one actually make contact, but like trying to kick them out of the way, or just angry that pigeons even exist, calling them city rats and things like that. And it's just like so sad. Oh gosh.
And it is really sad, and it still happens. And actually, even within the vegan community, it's still not known. This is not known, and it's not necessarily a fact. And one of the big projects that I work with is about pigeon racing, and definitely even within the vegan community, that is still unheard of. People know about greyhound racing and horse racing and dog fighting and all these other horrific things that go on, but they just don't know about pigeon racing and how prolific and cruel it is. And actually a lot of not a lot, that's a bit unfair to say a lot, but a proportion of pigeons that end up on the street will be lost racing pigeons as well. So they add to the numbers on the street. The other thing to point out as well about the street pigeons that we see is that unlike a wild bird, because they're domestic, they won't breed depending on the food source. So in the UK, we have a blackbird. It's a good example. So it's quite a smallish bird, and they will have 3 or 4 eggs in each brood. They'll breed maybe like 2 or 3 times if we have good weather in the UK, which we don't always have. But so they'll maybe have 2 or 3 clutches of eggs in one year. But if we have a huge drought over here, it's very, very hot, or if we have an awful lot of rain, or there's just not as many insects around, they won't breed. So they'll just leave that. They might have laid their eggs, but they won't incubate them. They'll leave them and they'll just abandon the nest. They're really intelligent. Now, pigeons are extremely intelligent, but because they're domestic, they don't understand that. So they will continue to breed even when there isn't enough food. And that is what is so difficult. And because that means it's very difficult to control their population. So you can't starve them out. If you put a ban to everybody in the world feeding pigeons, then of course, at some point, we would see a drop in the levels, the amount of pigeons that we see, just because a lot of them would starve to death. But what actually tends to happen is they just find a food source from somewhere else. So because we don't pick up our own food waste, they would just start eating less appropriate food. And then what happens is you then get a flock of pigeons that's actually still alive, still breeding, but is very, very sick. And that's the problem we have. And then that's when you get diarrhea and you get all sorts of problems on buildings. And then again, they get blamed for that. So yeah, there's no easy way to sort of control their flock numbers. And again, that's a problem that we're causing with when we leave our food waste everywhere. So it's all on us. All of it is on
yes,
us.
it is. Can you talk a little bit about pigeon racing for people who might not know what that is?
Yeah, I'd love to, actually, as horrific as it is. I hope you're all sitting down because it's horrendous. Pigeon racing, they breed male and female, cock and hen. They will allow them to get together and mate. Pigeons mate for life. They love each other very, very deeply in the same way that basically almost like a human relationship. They really fall in love. They kiss, and they both parents bring up the young, so they produce a crop milk. Unlike, there's only two birds that do that. There's pigeons, and I think it might be flamingos and penguins. There's two or three, but pigeons produce crop milk, which is a hormone-based milk in the same way that female humans do and other mammals do. But for a bird, it's pretty rare. But they produce a crop milk in their crop, which is, if you imagine from our mouth to our stomach, we've just got a long esophagus. A bird has a bit in the middle that's a little bit like a bucket. So they take their food into that bucket, and then that means that if they need to fly away quickly, the food's not digesting in there yet. It can be contained and they can fly away from danger. So they're really clever, evolutionary. So that's why they do that. But part of that means that because the some of the food stays in there, some of the cells in that crop produce milk. It's incredible. So that's male and female birds. So both of them feed their young, and part of their sort of routine, their mating routine, is to pass that crop milk from bird to bird, so from male to female bird, and it really enforces that the bond of love that they have. So there's that to remember. I'll come back to that point. There's a reason I'm telling you that. The other thing about pigeons is, for some reason, we don't really know exactly the science behind it, but they're very good at finding their way home. Now, they're not generally migratory birds. Some wood pigeons do migrate, but feral pigeons and the domestic racing pigeon that we're talking about are non-migratory birds. They do not need to go and find food anywhere else because they're domestic. So they will stay near their home. However, if you take them 10 miles away from that home, they generally will find their way back. And people realize that. So they realized that what they could do is they could teach them that this was their home. We take you away, you can bring a message back. And so we use them in the war, and we use them for communication, even back to sort of, I think the Egyptians used them for communication as well. So that's a well-known thing. So modern day pigeon racing, they do something called widowhood. So this comes back to that whole thing about them passing the milk and being good parents. They will allow them to breed. They will be sitting on eggs or about to, create some eggs. So they're really bonded, and then they will take the cock away from the hen. They'll leave the hen on the eggs. They'll take the cock away. They'll do that for a day, but they'll put them just close enough so they can still hear the hens, because obviously they communicate. We just don't understand what they say. And then the next day they'll let them back together, and they will be so delighted to be back together. They love each other, and they swap over so that the hen can go and eat. The male will sit on the eggs, and she'll go and get something to eat. And they're like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're back." You can see it in their body language. You can hear it in their coos, and they're really pleased to be back together. And then a couple of days later, the people that race them will do the same thing again. They'll take the cock away for a couple of days, and they will be desperate to get back together. Desperate. So desperate that actually there is a different form of food that they're given at that time, because it's so stressful for them, called widowhood food or widowing food. It's so stressful. It's much higher in proteins and carbohydrates and fats, because they won't eat as much because they're missing the partner so much. Then 3 or 4 days later, they'll let the cock come back in. Same thing happens. They're all in love again. They're desperate to get back. And as if that wasn't cruel enough, they will then take them away from a third time. But this time, the cock gets placed in a basket. They get put in a lorry with thousands of other birds, and they get driven sometimes up to 800 miles away.
Wow.
So I think an average race is about 300 miles if they're going on a long race, but they will take them across the sea on a ferry over to a different country, and then they will release them, and they have to fly back. And they're basing that, as I say, on that homing instinct that they have, but also on the fact that their only thought is that they want to get back to their partners. So it's physically incredibly cruel. An investigation in 2004 by Peter I think you guys call it PETA over there. They did some work with pigeon fanciers, and they reckon that overseas flying, so for us this would be over the channel from France, or from here, a lot of races, I live in Pembrokeshire in Wales, a lot of races race from Ireland and back. In the channel here, which is only about 45 miles, they reckon about 45% of them will drown, because they don't have the ability, particularly from France to England, they don't have the ability to navigate long distances over the sea. So they get thirsty, they come down, and then they're like, oh, they can't swim. So, and there's nothing to land on. We've had so many in from boats in the channel, well, not in the channel, but in the Irish Sea here, where they've come down and landed on boats. And then we've had phone calls of people saying there's a pigeon on the boat. Like, why is there a pigeon on the boat? Well, they've come 20 miles across the channel, and they're so hungry and so thirsty, or the wind's blown them, they've come down, and that's the only thing they can. So it happens all the time. It's so cruel. The ones that do make it home, the pigeon fancier, to the people that race them, will say that there's no money in it. It's all for trophies, but it kind of doesn't matter whether they're winning £20,000 or whether they're winning nothing. The point is that for that bird, it's irrelevant. The point is that bird's been exploited so badly.
Yeah.
If they make it home, great. They get looked after and they get treasured. If they make it home, but maybe a week late, a lot of fanciers will just break their necks because they're not very good. They're disposable. They're commodities. And when they don't get home and they get handed in, then it's not classed as a death to a pigeon racer, is classed as a loss. And if you look at any of the information online from pigeon fanciers, even from the big association for pigeons out here, that's what they talk about. They never talk about deaths, they talk about losses. So they say, oh, our losses this year have been 10%. Our losses this year, we raced 65,000 birds and we lost 10,000 birds. And as I say, that loss, generally it means death, or it means birds out on the street starving, or a lot of the time it's that they're picked up by people, they're given to rehabbers like me, and then they end up living in people's houses because they're domestic. So it's incredibly cruel, incredibly cruel.
Yeah. Wow. I had no idea about pigeon racing.
It's horrible.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry. I'm really sorry to bring it down because it is awful. And so there's another thing that we do with pigeons as well, which is we breed show birds. There's a lot of that goes on as well. So it's a little bit like breeding dogs, basically. It's the same thing. So we'll breed them. They're not particularly, it's not very good for the birds. There are some birds now that can't feed themselves because we've bred such bad beaks that they can't feed themselves properly. They can't feed their own young. So a little bit like we do with cattle and actually with dogs, with pugs and bulldogs and those sort of dogs, we artificially inseminate. There's a lot of this goes on. It's just horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. So yeah, it's a terrible thing. We just exploit these. But the difference with pigeons is, and with pigeon racing, if you are wherever you are, in a town, in a city, out in the countryside, and you look up and see 100 pigeons flying over, you are going to think, oh, they love flying. Look at them. They're having a great time. Right. And they're not. They're having a terrible time because they're literally flying for their lives. They're flying to get home to the partners. And that's how they get away with it. That's pigeon racing. It's horrendous.
It is. It's so gross what humans will do because they want something. Like with the way that people are doing this pigeon racing, like you'd mentioned with the pugs and like people, oh, these dogs are so cute. And the English bulldogs too, right? They can't breathe. They spend their whole life struggling to breathe, but people don't care because isn't their face cute? But when I see those dogs, like, I mean, I love every animal I've ever encountered, but I also think this poor dog, just their life, it's just not, I don't know.
Part of the reason that I gave up working in veterinary practice was because the last practice I worked at had a specialist there at something called BOAS surgery, BOAS, and that is to do with the B stands for brachiocephalic airway, and it's these dogs that have got such small faces, short faces. We've changed their skulls so much. So we're talking about French bulldogs, Boston Terriers, pugs, British bulldogs, the same, American bulldogs. All these dogs now, their nares, their nose, they just can't breathe through them. So they breathe through their throat all the time, which damages their throat, but also their soft palate now and their hard palate is so short because it's squished into this skull that many times as they are born, they can't breathe. We have to intubate them now, and generally they're born under cesarean section because they're born to dogs that don't have big enough pelvic areas for their great big heads that come out on these tiny little bodies. They're deformed. It is deformity, and we've bred that into them. And there was a surgeon there, and now don't get me wrong, like from a surgical point of view, the things they were doing were absolutely incredible, but how twisted is that she's performing surgeries and she's charging £3,000 or £4,000 a time, and breeders are prepared to pay that because they know they can charge £12,000 for one of those dogs. So that is a financial loss to a breeder. They'll say, well, if you have a litter of 12 puppies and 4 of them need BOAS surgeries, that's £12,000, but we'll get £10,000 per puppy. So it's a negligible loss to that breeder. And that dog will suffer even after the surgery, even though, I mean, she was a very good surgeon. She's very, very good at it. But even so, they will still suffer for the whole of their lives in some way or other. What are we doing? It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. The people that have got their eyes open like us, we can see that they do it with dogs. But again, with pigeons, fantail pigeons look amazing. And, old German pigeons look amazing. It's like, yeah, they look weird, but they look weird because they can't feed, they can't eat, they can't do anything properly, like a proper pigeon should, a wild pigeon should. So yeah, it's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I imagine that in the pigeon racing world that they do know who I am. They all know who I am. I've been very, very vocal, and I've got into a lot of trouble over the years with that, but I won't shut up. Maybe triggering for some people to hear, but yesterday, we've had to get the police involved again because I've had another threat to my life.
Oh my gosh.
And they're just I think what's so shocking about these people as well is I'm sure it is only the small minority that would go as far as that, but the terminology that they use is so graphic as to what they want to do to me. It's so graphic that it really makes you question who these people are. The majority of pigeon racers are not like that. They are not. And actually, the majority of the people that I talk to about it, they're really nice people. They're really lovely people. And they just can't see that what they're doing is exploitation and abuse.
Yeah.
It's the same as talking to a non-vegan. They just can't see that what they're doing is abuse. And that's the large majority of the pigeon racing world. They genuinely do tell us that they love their birds. And actually, on the whole, their birds are really well cared for. I mean, they're treated like, they call them athletes, and they're treated like athletes. They're really well looked after. But they're really well looked after until they're not. And actually, one of the campaigns I started this week was asking pigeon racers, which is why I got then that threat that came in this week, actually asking pigeon racers to show us their old retired birds, because they all say, we don't kill our birds. And we published a video that shows that they do kill them. There's a man talking about putting his pigeons in the bin. And what he means by that is he's going to break their necks and literally put them in the bin because he got a flock full of ill birds in the loft and he didn't want to pay to treat them. So instead, he was just going to kill them all and get new birds. And we got hold of that video and published it, which is why then there was a lot of hatred for us and for me and for our association. So we challenged the people that were challenging us and said, okay, great, show us your loft. Because if you're racing 50 birds or 30 birds even, if they're looked after, they'll live for at least 15 years. They live a long time.
Yeah.
So that tells me, basic maths, you can already do it in your head.
Yep.
If you've got 50 birds that are currently racing and they only race until they're about 4 years old, you're going to have at least 100 birds that are retired. You've got to have at least 100 birds if you're racing 30 birds a year. And silence. As soon as I challenged them, we had absolute radio silence. And then the threats come in because they know that they kill their birds.
Yeah.
It's horrendous.
It is. Yeah. They see these birds not as the individuals who have these bonds and who have an interest in their own life and want to live as pigeons in the best way they can. Yeah. They're literally commodities that make or lose them money. And they it makes it really hard to get beyond that wall to see them for who they are when that's kind of who you are. Except we do it. People go vegan all the time. that wall comes down and we start to see, but maybe it's because we didn't have money invested. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I agree. And a lot of them will say it's tradition. My dad did it. His dad did it. And you're like, tradition is not an excuse for any form of oppression and exploitation.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So, or they'll bring up the war. They bring up two things. And I always say, I will not talk on this because I do not have the heritage for this. So they'll bring up, a lot of people and a lot of vegans will use veganism and say, well, slavery used to be acceptable and now it's not. And the other thing that the pigeon races are, and it's right, it was only because people started talking about it. And the other thing that the pigeon races will bring up is history and the fact that they were used in the war. And there's a lot of racism in that community, the pigeon racing community. We see it all the time. And one of the things that they will also always say, and this is massively offensive, is they'll say to me, you'd be speaking German if it wasn't for pigeons because they saved us in the war. And I'm just like, whoa, right. First of all, I'm not going to talk about that. Those were different times. And actually, was it animal abuse, what we did to horses and dogs and pigeons in the war? Yes, of course it was animal abuse. They didn't want to fight for us. The pigeon racers will use words like bravery. They were so brave. They weren't brave. They were doing the same thing as they're doing now. They're just trying to get home because that's the only life they know. But is it my place to comment on the abuse that we used to do to save ourselves as a nation? No, I don't have the knowledge. I wasn't there. I'm too young. It's not my place to comment on that. And also, that was a long time ago. We've moved on from that. Society's moved on. We don't need to keep raking that up. But that's their default setting. And part of that is because of the age group of a lot of these races as well. A lot of them are men that are over 60. And they're generally white men. That's the demographic.
No
so
surprise.
They are also, so they've got enough money to do it. I know they've got enough money to do it. They're bigoted, they're racist, they're homophobic. I'm on the queer spectrum. That's the other reason they don't like me. And they throw that at me sometimes as well. So the funniest thing that I love is when people will find something about me online from like past, I don't know, relationships or things that I've said on Facebook, on my own personal Facebook when I used to have one years ago. And they'll go, oh, look, I found this woman. She's gay or she's had 3 husbands and blah. And I'm like, yeah, like literally there are I've got like millions of skeletons, millions of them, but none of them are in closets. They're all just running around, all my skeletons. I couldn't give a shit. Like, say what you like. There's literally, and I think that's the other thing. I know it sounds daft, and I know not everybody's like that. I thrive on confrontation. I love it. It keeps me going. I really enjoy it. But not everybody's like that. I get it. And but also I think there are parallels to the way I live. My personal life is very public, but the way that I also live as a vegan. And I think that's it. If you can just open all your closets and be like, do you know what? These are things I did. Some of them are quite embarrassing. I'm sure there are plenty of pictures. I used to model and it was really, I don't think even the word risque does it justice. It was basically porn. I did that years and years ago. And that's how I was a single parent. That's how I earned a living at one point. Those pictures will be out there somewhere, and there are videos. They will be out there somewhere. They've not quite found me yet, but they will at one point. And you know what? I just made sure that my bum looked good at the time because I knew they could literally come back and bite me on the ass, and that's fine. And that's all you can do. And I'm a different person now. Like, I'm not ashamed of any of that, and I'd do it again now if I thought I could, if it wasn't 50. But maybe there's still a market for that. Anyway, digressing. But I think as long as you own your words and you own your past, nobody can touch you.
Yeah.
They could, if these threats that have come in this week, if somebody does do what they've said they're going to do, they could physically hurt me, but they can't damage me. They can't change the way that I feel and the way that I am. And they will never, ever change the way I feel about animal rights, because that's my whole life. My whole life has been animal rights.
Yeah.
It's just that to start off with, it wasn't quite there. It wasn't quite right. I wasn't doing enough. But
yeah.
Cool, that was a journey, wasn't it?
It was. A fantastic journey. We have hit so many emotions, and I know I've learned a lot. So I'm certain that my listeners will learn a lot too.
Thank you.
But I want to talk about the Animal Rights Choir before we run out of time. Tell me about that.
Yeah. It's so exciting. So because I just never have enough hours in the day, what I thought was, let's do something else as well. So my best friend, my beautiful, beautiful soul sister, Vegan Queen V, she comes and stays with us quite a lot. She's a touring musician, and she dedicates, a little bit like me, she just gave up everything. She's been a professional musician all her life, since she left university, and she gave it all up to almost start again about 6 years ago as a vegan musician. And basically, she now lives in a van, she tours around, and she plays at animal sanctuaries. And to raise money, she works for National Animal Rights Day. She's written their song for them. She does everything. She's so philanthropic. She's amazing. It's just really pure altruism. So she lives very frugally. She lives quite a simple life, and just does all these incredible things to raise money for vegan causes. She's got 2 albums, both vegan. The first one's a vegan animal rights songs, and the second one is called In Dog We Trust. And there were a few other songs about love and life and veganism and different things in that. And so she comes here and she records while she's here, and she's doing various things. And then she came here in January. We were just walking on the beach one day, and she went, we always have these absolutely ridiculous idea, like brainstorming ideas. And she went, I've got an idea. I'm going to start a choir. And I was like, oh, here we go. What am I going to get roped into now? And she went, but it's going to be an animal rights choir. And I was like, what? This is amazing.
Yeah.
So I've got experience. Yeah, it's so exciting. So I love singing. We were always singing together, me and Jen. I used to be in a county choir years ago. I was in a county choir, and it's just something I've always, I've played instruments. It's something that interests me, and music is a big part of my life. So when she said that, I was like, this is amazing. And we launched it in June. It took about 6 months, and we're still, even though it's launched, we're still very new, and we're just ironing out how we want it to look. But it's an online choir, which is very different. We had our first rehearsal of the rehearsal 2 weeks ago, and it went okay. And we've got our very first choir rehearsal this Wednesday. I don't know when this is going out, but this will be the 25th of June. 25 is our first official choir rehearsal. So anybody can join. The only problem that we have is it's done over it's not Zoom, but it's similar to Zoom, so there is latency. So because of that, you can't have everyone singing at the same time, because it would just sound horrendous. Even if we had 100 of the most beautiful singers in the world, it would sound horrendous, because they'd all be singing at slightly different times. So everybody's muted on the choir, but the idea is that they're learning the song, and then we will go into breakout rooms and try little different things. But we also then want to get together. So we're already booked for 3 veg fests in this country, which is amazing. So Tim Barford has been a real champion of ours, and he's allowing us to have a stand there and talk about it and get new members. But we're performing for him. We're at a festival in Pembrokeshire, which is where I am, Veg Out West. We're doing a performance there, and also we're on the children's stage at Vegan Camp Out, which is the UK's biggest vegan festival. So, and we only launched last week. So it's been absolute chaos, but really, really brilliant. So, mixture of animal rights songs and Jen's songs. So that's Vegan Queen V. Her name's Jen Armstrong. We'll be learning songs from her albums as well, and also then just different songs that are inspire people. And other, like Mobius Loop, we'll be learning some of their songs and singing them. So yeah, it just would be really exciting. And like we said right at the start about joy, music. If you love music, and most people do in some way, I think it's so emotional.
Yeah.
And whether you enjoy singing, if you enjoy singing, whether you have a brilliant voice or an average voice, it doesn't matter. The point is, we want to get the emotion out. And I guess the tagline for this is find your voice for the animals, because that's what we want people to do. We want people just to come out. But we also want people to use it as a form of gentle protest.
Yeah.
Because if you go out on the street and you see people with placards, no matter what they're out there for, whether it's LGBTQ plus rights, or whether it's animal activism or feminism, no matter what they're out there for, if you're out there and you've got people chanting them with the megaphone, roar, it can look quite aggressive, even when it's done peacefully. But if you see 50 people out there singing beautiful songs, how can that look aggressive? How can that look, it can't look any other way. then it's beautiful. And we're hoping that we'll get people all over the world to do this. We are working with people internationally at the moment and trying to set up little choirs everywhere. Because of course anyone from all over the world can join in with the rehearsal. And then we want little splinter groups to break off and do these in their towns themselves. So they can go off and use the music that Jen provides and do these protests. Because if somebody sees a choir of people singing, they'll look and they'll come over and they'll ask about it. We are vegan, and obviously you're not going to get away from that. Her performance name is Vegan Queen V, but we're not using that too much. We're more using animal rights, because so many people will come into it then.
Yeah.
Whether, even if they're not vegetarian, they might be meat eaters and they'll come into it. But I think hopefully then they'll spend time with people like us, that are vegan and are ethical in that respect. And they'll also be singing songs about animal rights, and hopefully that the idea is that they'll soak that in. And also they'll be basically, we are using their vulnerabilities, which isn't very ethical, but when you're singing, you're quite vulnerable.
Yeah.
If I'm a confident singer, I'm confident with my voice, and obviously Jen's a professional, but you're still vulnerable when you're doing that. So and everybody generally feels a little bit, even performers feel a little bit like that, I think. So when they're in that vulnerable state, they are definitely going to be more open to listening to what we've got to say about animal rights. So that is the Animal Rights Choir.
I love it. I'm going to sign up when we're done here.
Do it.
I'm gonna.
We would love to have you on board. That would be amazing. Yeah, that would be amazing. You could start with, where do you live?
I'm in New Jersey.
I thought you were. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. You can start the New Jersey one.
Yes.
That'd be amazing. So excited. So excited about it. Yeah, we'll talk afterwards. Definitely.
Yeah. So we are running out of time, and I have like a zillion more questions I want to ask you, but I want to be respectful of our hour together. And I've got one more question for you.
Okay.
How does hummus show up in your life?
Hummus. I am terrible for. I hate cooking. I hate it. I'm a whole food plant-based vegan, so I don't eat much sort of fake meat or anything like that. We eat tofu, but generally we eat a lot of salads, like really finely chopped up every single veg, like whatever's in the fridge, broccoli, anything, all raw. Chuck it in. I'm not a raw vegan, but with salads I'll do all of that. And funnily enough, I came home last night and Matt had done tea, because he got home before me. We call it tea. I don't know what you call your evening dinner, we call it tea. So my tea last night was a Greek salad with actually vegan feta cheese, which was delicious. I've not had that for years. It was really good. With this massive pot of hummus, and I laughed my head off because I knew I was coming on this podcast today. And it was like, this is great. I like making my own hummus. I like making my own. I think there's nothing better. And my friend Lisa years ago taught me a way. If you make it fresh, you don't need to use any or very, very little oil in it, because hummus has got loads of oil in it, and olive oil, which is good for you, but like too much of it isn't. And I do like hummus. So what I do is when we make it fresh, use it with iced water instead of oil, and you can replace about 80% of the oil that we put ice cubes in your blender instead. And as long as you eat it within about 6 hours, it tastes just the same, but it's got 80% less fat in it. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to give that a try.
Otherwise I would be, because it's delicious. So yeah, love that.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that little tip, Sue. And thank you for joining me today. We talked about some really fun, light things and some very difficult things. And I appreciate you sharing all of that and going through the emotions with me and making sure that we can get the message out about pigeons and just kind of our thoughts around animals as a whole. So thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate you listening. Thank you so much. Go out there and hug a pigeon.
Yes. Welcome back. To connect with Sue, visit her websites littlegreenpigeon.co.uk and National Pigeon Advocacy Association.co.uk. Follow her on Instagram and Facebook at Little Green Pigeon. You'll find these links in the show notes. I hope you found this episode helpful and inspiring. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're loving it, please give Did You Bring the Hummus a 5-star rating and leave a review. It's an easy way to keep supporting the show. Be sure to share these episodes with your friends. If you're finding something good here, they will too. If you're a vegan or know a vegan who would be a great fit for the podcast, follow the Be a Guest link in the show notes. Fill out the quiz and I'll be in touch. Get on my mailing list and stay up to date on all things Did You Bring the Hummus? Get more info on how you can sign up for a meditation, one of my programs, or to support the podcast via the links in the show notes. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Did You Bring the Hummus? And visit my website, didyouBringTheHummus.com, for more information about me, updates on what I'm working on, new podcast episodes, and all things vegan. Finally, I would love to hear from you. What do you need help with? Is there a topic you want to hear covered on a future episode? DM me on Instagram or send me an email at info@didyouBringTheHummus.com. Thanks for listening.